Hazard pay is back on, baby, and so is the new hit show on Overnight's LALATE, Hazard Pay. It's going to be in the third stimulus package, but Joe Biden has yet to tell us anything about it. Except, 1, there'll be public sector hazard pay, 2, there'll be private sector hazard pay, and 3, there'll be a modification to an existing tax code that concerns hazard pay applicants. But the question is, when, how much, how does it work? In this Overnight LALATE video, I explain the concepts of hazard pay. Up to $10,000, $13 an hour from hours you work from January up to the present. Who are essential workers? What was the push and what was the pull during the 2020 season over hazard pay? It's important to understand what hazard pay is, because when it gets rolled out under the third stimulus package, you need to know how and when to bounce as a Purple Hawk. It's not an existing account that'll be there for a lot of times. It's a diminishing fund. And with that, enjoy this Overnight LALATE exclusive on hazard pay. What will happen with hazard pay as we come into late July? Will it get approved? And will you get the $10,000? This is LALATE, and thanks for tuning in for an update on the second stimulus check and stimulus package. This video is about hazard pay, that incredible $10,000 lump sum check that you could receive if you were an essential worker and worked during the pandemic, or if you're still an essential worker and still working going forward. There's great news today, and it's really quite exciting, and I'm here to update you about a new twist and turn. There's a new movement among certain unions in certain classes of essential workers who are really trying to get this bill pushed through. So if you are in a union that worked during this pandemic, and you are an essential worker, or if you are tied to a group of a concerted group that is not particularly unionized, let's say a Facebook group or a coalition that involves your trade, please be in communication with that group right now, because those groups are really pushing to get this hazard pay bill pushed through. Let's update you and go back over what's going on with the hazard pay bill. As you know, it is part of the HEROES Act. It landed in the Senate from the House, and a subsection of the HEROES Act called the HEROES Fund. These names are just a little bit overwhelming sometimes. And it proposes to give $10,000, up to $10,000 for essential workers. The calculation, the amount, let's go through all of that right now. First, am I eligible? Am I an essential worker? We went through the details of the essential workers in earlier videos a few days ago. We'll do it again earlier next week. But ultimately, you need to determine whether you're an essential worker. It's defined under the HEROES Act itself. So it's not defined by purposes of state law or local or what your boss says or what your sister or brother says or what I think you are. I think you're all essential. But ultimately it's defined by the bill itself. Now, next, there are certain gray areas, and we have certainly touched on those gray areas. I'm going to repeat them as well right now. There are certain gray areas where it's really not clear as the bill is written if that intended to say that's an essential worker or not. Examples of things that are not gray areas are grocery stores and nurses. It clearly defines those as essential workers. Pharmacies, clearly defined as essential workers. Okay, here come the gray areas. Anyone who worked at Walmart, Target, Costco, Walgreens, CVS, all those are gray areas. Why? It's very simple, because ultimately all those businesses have pharmacies, all those businesses sell groceries, but they're not, quote, grocery stores as the essential terms define grocery stores, and they're certainly not pharmacies. Costco is not a pharmacy, but it does have a pharmacy in it. So what is going to happen? We don't know. That is the gray area. The number of hours. The most important thing you need to do if you have realized your essential work and you qualify for hazard pay is you need to start pulling your timesheets. You need to pull your timesheets and know the number of essential hours you have worked starting from January to the present. It can be at multiple essential jobs. It can be both overtime and regular hours. It can be irregardless of whether you were laid off, brought back, laid off, fired, brought back again. I want you to include every single hour because that is the calculation you need to know. You need to know those number of hours. You need to have those timesheets ready. Now, I'm not going to tell you to get all the timesheets ready, but if you have them somewhere, just get them around ready so you know where they are, because this could be a big drawn out fight come late August if it gets approved and bosses don't apply for the hazard pay. I don't know. I'm not predicting bad news to you. I just want you to be informed. Ultimately, the calculation is $13 per hour times the number of hours you worked as essential worker during the pandemic or going forward. It's great news. Next, you need to determine who really is your employer. This is really important. It's great news for me to really go over this with you because ultimately you need to know and educate yourself who you'd have to tee up to get this as hazard pay. The hazard pay is applied for by your employer. The employer does not have to apply for it also. Those are two parts of the bill that I absolutely detest. I'm not going to mince my words. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. The employer applies for you. You cannot apply for it. And the employer does not have to apply for you. So I want you to figure out in your mind who is the employer and who you would contact. So for example, let's say you worked at a pharmacy chain. Who is the actual person that would apply for you? And let's say it's a corporate pharmacy chain and has, 55 locations. It's not particularly the pharmacist you work next to. Is it HR? Is it the human resources person? Is it someone at corporate? I want you to start inquiring about that because this is one of those things where there's a lot of money. It's not going to get diluted. That's great news. But it's a lot of money, and I want you to have this stuff ready. What am I talking about? Well, when this channel first launched, PUA hadn't started. So I told viewers how to get ready for PUA. PPP had just started, and I told people this is how to get ready for PPP. The worst thing you could possibly do is do things after the fact. Start to get ready after the fact, after the bill is proposed. No, it only takes you half an hour. Look around and figure out who is the person you would reach out to figure out where I would apply, where I would ask that employer to apply for my hazard pay. It's a great thing. Next, I want you to figure out who else you've spoken to at your work about hazard pay. This is really critical because let's say you work at a pharmacy and you are one of 20 employees there. And there's a boss, and let's say it's a single office. Let's say it's a single location, and there's a single owner. Well, talk with your 19 other fellow workers and say, hey, there's this hazard pay bill. We got to make sure our boss applies for it if it gets approved. It's a lot of money. And I want you to start that discussion now. Next, something that I get a lot about as I'm really starting to itch. It is a hot Sunday afternoon today. If I'm really struggling in this heat here, so please bear with me. If you can't grasp it, it is hot and muggy here for an LA weather. First, a lot of people ask me, does hazard pay conflict with everything? So let me go through that. One, hazard pay does not conflict with EIDL. Jovita will not bother you about your hazard pay. Second, hazard pay does not conflict with PPP. Doesn't conflict with the PPP loan, which I don't think you would have actually gotten. But that's what's sort of interesting. Third, hazard pay does not conflict with a second stimulus check. I get that question a lot. So I've already said to you that you will get a second stimulus check. The second stimulus check is the only case in which you won't get a second stimulus check is if you're a viewer who works hazard pay but also makes a lot of money, over $120-something thousand a year, $100,000 a year. You may not get a second stimulus check if you made a lot of money last year. But if you didn't make a lot of money last year, but you did work as an essential work, you are entitled to hazard pay, then don't worry. The second stimulus check does not conflict with hazard pay. You will get both of them. Last, PUA. PUA does not conflict, UI does not conflict, and FPUC does not conflict with hazard pay. One has nothing to do with the other. So that is also really great news. Questions that I sometimes get and I haven't been able to answer because the videos have been running long. So let me answer them right now. Really interesting, fascinating details. First, When would this start to get funded, and when and where would people apply? So the bill is likely, if approved, would be approved around August 7th or 8th. That's what this channel has been reporting. So that's the day it would be approved. Next, when would it get funded, and where would the people start applying? I get that question every single day, like 20 times a day. It's a great question. I love the question. So here's the answer. The answer is we don't know. And the way the bills are generally written is they say, hey, we're approving a fund for hazard pay. Hazard pay will be funded by the Treasury and funded by the Federal Reserve, and applicants will apply. Applicants will be the employers, and they'll apply here. And so it tells you all these details, but it doesn't tell you, how to apply, where you apply. It doesn't give you the application. It doesn't give you the launch date. That's how these things happen. So don't worry. We don't have an application live. We don't have an application pending. We don't know who will process the application, which department of government will process the application. Could be Treasury, could be the Federal Reserve. We don't know. But when we do know, that's what this channel will tell you. Last, and the most important thing is, will hazard pay get approved? I got to tell you that of all the second stimulus packages that are on the books, that are all proposed, there are three that are really the most critical: hazard pay, renters assistance, and second stimulus check, and unemployment as well is extremely important. But if they don't pass, members of Congress, hazard pay, I got to tell you, it is political suicide. You have nurses and grocery workers work through the pandemic, and you don't help them. You brush them aside and then use these words like, and here I'm ranting, I got to rant. Use these words like, oh, they make too much money already. They don't need any more help. We can't help nurses and doctors and grocery workers who work through the pandemic and risk their lives, because if we help them, it'll create a welfare state. Boy, if someone comes out and starts saying that in late July, which I think they will, it's really going to be political suicide, because it shows an inept understanding of how people are. It shows a complete myopic look and a complete disdain for people who sacrifice their lives during this pandemic. If people who wear $1,200 loafers and are the Treasury secretaries of the White House and say, I don't really care about people who risk their lives during the pandemic. They make enough money already. Go stop bothering me. That will show a real political calamity for the people that try that angle, because I don't think anyone is going to buy it. Everyone knows the risk and the sacrifices that viewers of my channel who are essential workers did during the pandemic, and are possibly still doing to this day. Everyone knows how they risk their lives, and if people brush you aside when we get to a second stimulus check debate, boy, any slight sentence like that will literally go viral, because it'll be so shockingly horrible, because everyone understands the sacrifices that essential workers made during the pandemic. And to not give them a penny, or to brush them aside, or make it de minimis, or as I call it, reward them. Why don't insult my essential workers and say you're rewarding them. It is really quite horrible. What's horrible about it is we saw it percolating on Friday. Steve Mnuchin, the Treasury Secretary to Donald Trump in the White House, said that he did not like a new economic report that said cleaning services, janitorial services, who are essential workers who do qualify for hazard pay, got more money on unemployment after being laid off when the pandemic grew than working, and he doesn't like that. He doesn't want them to have any money. I gotta say, the hammer's gonna hit the nail, because those type of remarks are so out of touch. It's going to backfire. The good news is I really do think essential workers will get hazard pay. They will get some form of hazard pay. I think it's going to be a drag-out battle with the Democrats and the Republicans, but I do think it's going to get approved. If you have questions to today's video, drop in the comments below. Earlier today, LALATE launched a new item. The new item is a a private, secure Instagram account. The Instagram account is for people to share information with one another to get through this pandemic, and it focuses on certain key stimulus items. EIDL grants, EIDL loans, EIDL reconsiderations, and second stimulus and stimulus check items, basically links to the IRS to ensure that you got the first stimulus check and to route you the information about getting a second stimulus check. If you're interested in being part of that private group, follow us. You have to do two things: subscribe to this channel and follow us on Instagram at LALATE_. Send us a DM and we will send you the link to that private account in which you can help one another, because that's the spirit of this channel, helping one another. As always, stay with LA for more.